Good afternoon, everyone. The topic of today's presentation is neuro involving substance abuse. That's moderator is Dr. Danis. What is addiction? Drug addiction is a chronically relapsing disorder characterized by a compulsion to seek and take the drug, loss of control in limiting the intake, and emergence of a negative emotional state that is dysphoria, anxiety, irritability when access to the drug is prevented. From a diagnostic perspective, the term addiction is now encompassed by the term substance use disorder. The DSM-5 criteria for substance abuse disorders. Number one, the drug is taken in larger amounts or over a longer period than intended. There is a persistent desire or unsuccessful effort to reduce the drug use. A great deal of time is spent in activities necessary to obtain, use, or recover from the drug. Craving for the drug. Recurrent drug use resulting in a failure to fulfill major obligations at work, home, or school. Continued use despite persistence of recurrent social or interpersonal problems caused by drug abuse. Important activities are given up or reduced because of the use. Recurrent use in situations where it is physically hazardous. Continued use despite knowledge of having a persistent or recurring physical or psychological problem that is likely to have been caused by or exacerbated by the drug. And tolerance to the drug. And withdrawal, either experiencing a drug withdrawal syndrome or taking the drug to relieve or avoid the withdrawal syndrome. Now we'll study the phases of addiction. The transition from casual drug use to substance use disorder has been neurobiologically conceptualized as a shift from impulsive to compulsive use by a transition from positive to negative reinforcement mechanisms. Reinforcement is a motivational process by which a response contingent delivery or removal of a stimulus increases the probability of a subsequent response. The mechanism of underlying the impulse control disorder involves positive reinforcement, where tension or arousal leads to an impulsive act to consume the drug followed by pleasure or gratification. And the mechanism underlying compulsive disorder is negative reinforcement, where anxiety or irritability leads to a compulsive behavior to consume the drug, resulting in compulsive behaviors to substance use disorders can be conceptualized as a three-stage recurring cycle. Number one, binge or intoxication. Second, withdrawal or negative effect. Third, preoccupation or anticipation. This worsens over time and involves neuroplastic changes in the brain reward, stress, and executive function systems. Number one, the binge or intoxication state. The basal ganglia, the nucleus accumbens, dorsal striatum, globus pallidus, and thalamus is involved in the binge intoxication state. The nucleus accumbens is responsible for rewards, and the dorsal striatum is responsible for forming habits and other routine activities. Second is the withdrawal and negative effect, which involves the amygdala, central nucleus of amygdala, bed nucleus of stria terminalis, and the transition area in the shell of nucleus accumbens. The extended amygdala is involved in behavior responses such as fight and flight, and negative emotions like anxiety and irritability, which is responsible for consumption of the drug. And the third stage is preoccupation or anticipation involving the frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex, orbitofrontal cortex, hippocampus, and insula. Chronic drug abuse leads to neuroadaptation and neuroplastic changes in the stress reward and circuit systems. Now, brain pathways in addiction. There are three primary circuits upon which chronic exposure to all drug of abuse act. Number one, chronic exposure to addictive drugs causes a homeostatic impairment of the dopamine system, in which natural rewards, for example, food, water, sex, social companionship, become less effective at increasing dopamine release. These homeostatic changes are thought to contribute to negative affective states observed between periods of drug taking or during periods of drug withdrawal and abstinence. A second neural circuit common to all drug of abuse involves the extra hypothalamic actions of the corticotrophin release hormone. The stress-like effects of CRF are thought to contribute to the negative affective and somatic symptoms that occur upon drug withdrawal. A final adaptation is cortical hypofrontality, in which there is reduced basal activity of cortical neurons and a decreased ability of natural rewards to activate certain cortical regions, such as the prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate cortex, and the orbitofrontal cortex. The critical role of dopamine in the reward pathway. The reward pathway is one of the major dopamine pathways in the brain, referred to as the dopamine reward system. The drugs that directly increase the synaptic dopamine levels are nicotine, cocaine, and amphetamines, Drugs that indirectly increase dopamine are opiates and alcohol. The mesocortical limbic dopamine pathway is consistently identified as a common neural substrate of all drug of abuse involving the ventral tegmental area, the median forebrain bundle, nucleus accumbens, and the limbic system. This is the functional anatomy of the reward pathway. Initially, dopamine neurons in the ventral tegmental area respond to the presence of a reward. If a sensory cue predicts the reward, dopamine fire in a response to cue, not the reward. If a reward fails to occur, dopamine neurons decrease the firing. Unexpected rewards result in higher dopamine releases and greater learning. This is how we start to associate cues with reward. Now, neural pathways in acute drug reward. Brain stimulation reward involves multiple brain regions. Most sensitive site is within the median forebrain bundle at the level of the lateral hypothalamus. The MFB connects the ventral tegmental area to the basal forebrain and carries the ascending norepinephrine and dopamine monoaminergic fibers. Acute administration of most drug of abuse decrease brain stimulation reward threshold, resulting in increased reward, and chronic administration results in increased reward thresholds during withdrawal, that is, they decrease the reward. So acute administration of drugs, so they decrease the brain stimulation reward threshold, resulting in increased drug high. And so chronic administrations increase the reward threshold, so which is that is subsequently decrease the reward, and we need more drug to feel the same amount of time. Neural pathways in tolerance and withdrawal. Tolerance is defined as reduced sensitivity of the effects of the drug, such as higher dose of the drug is required to achieve the same level of response achieved initially. Tolerance engages mechanisms that serve to oppose the reward and paradoxically reinforce drug-seeking behavior, which is the basis of the operant process theory, which helps to understand tolerance and transition from occasional drug use to addiction. The immediate rewarding effects of a drug of abuse are followed by delayed aversive effects that are due to drug-dependent recruitment of operant processes. These aversive effects emerge during drug withdrawal. Here, A represents acute drug reward and B represents drug opposite effects. Initially, when we consume the drug, we experience a drug high and our operant processes are weaker. With subsequent administration of the drug, we are unable to achieve the high with the same amount of drug, and our opponent processes become stronger, which is the basis for tolerance and which further leads to relapse. The gist of the operant process theory is that a person with chronic drug abuse will never touch the baseline even after remaining abstinent from the drug for a longer period of time. The mechanisms underlying tolerance to drugs and operant processes occur at the molecular, cellular, and circuit levels and can be classified as within or between system adaptations. Within system neural adaptation to chronic drug administration is hypofunction of the mesocortical limbic dopamine system during drug withdrawal, which leads to decreased motivation for non-drug related stimuli such as food, water, and increased sensitivity to motivation for the abused drug. A primary cause of effective withdrawal signs such as anxiety, dysphoria, depression, and irritability is due to the dramatic reduction in the dopamine neuron firing and dopamine release in efferent targets such as the nucleus accumbens. The drug of abuse produces an hyperbolic positive or drug high, the negative drug crash, emotional signals to the nucleus accumbens. Neural circuits like norepinephrine, corticotropin releasing hormone, orexin, dynorphin, substance P, vasopressin, neuropeptide Y, endocannabinoids also play critical roles in somatic and psychological withdrawal symptoms. Now, between system adaptation, the extended amygdala, composed of central nucleus of amygdala, bed nucleus of stria terminalis, and a middle portion of the nucleus accumbens shell, integrate the stress and reward system to produce a drug withdrawal-induced negative affective state and promote negative reinforcement processes which are associated with the development of substance use disorder. Now, neural pathways involved in substance use disorder. Impaired control of drug abuse, impaired control leads to voluntary drug abuse, which leads to habitual and compulsive drug use, which is encoded through drug-dependent transitions from prefrontal cortical to striatal and from ventral to dorsal striatal control over drug-seeking and drug-taking behaviors. The nucleus accumbens is a critical substrate for the rewarding drug effects that contribute to the development of substance use disorders, and the dorsal striatum is a critical substrate for the motor habits that maintain the substance use disorders. This is a summary of areas implicated in drug addiction. The ventral tegmental dopamine system, it is a motivational system which is important for survival behaviors such as eating, drinking, reproductive behaviors. And the drug of abuse increases the system's activity by various mechanisms, as we studied earlier. Second is nucleus accumbens. It gives a subjective experience of reward, gratification, anticipation of pleasure during craving, and drug of abuse increase the dopamine, which leads to high and craving during absence. Third is the limbic system. Uh, this is the emotional. It is an emotional response to cues that predict the reward, which recalls the memories of past experiences and is activated during craving. The drug of abuse causes agitation and behavioral activation during craving, and the patient remembers the pleasures of previous high. Fourth is the frontal cortex, which weighs the risk and benefit of the behaviors and controls the actions. The drug of abuse leads to inactivation, leading to impulsive decisions and compulsive behavior. The actions of various drugs used in substance abuse. Number one, bupropion. When we take nicotine, it acts by the alpha-1 receptors, which directly increase the, which acts on, which causes glutamate release, which further causes dopamine release, and the alpha-4 beta-2 receptor, which directly increases dopamine release. When when the patient is abstinent from nicotine, the dopamine is not released, and bupropion is a norepinephrine dopamine reuptake inhibitor, which increases the dopamine level in the synaptic space, which compensates for the craving, but it does not take the edge off. Second is the action of mu upward antagonists such as naltrexone, which reduce the reward of drinking. Naltrexone directly acts on the mu receptors, which decrease the dopamine release. And fourth is a camprosate. When we take alcohol, there is a state of GABA inhibition and a glutamate excitation. When the patient takes a camprosate, it creates a state of artificial alcohol, mimicking the actions of alcohol, which reduces the craving of the drug. These are my references. Okay. The within system is involved. It causes hypofunction of the mesocortical limbic dopamine system during withdrawal state, and there is which leads to the primary effective symptoms of irritability, anxiety, depression, dysphoria, which causes relapse and further drug intake. And between system, the extended amygdala, the central nucleus of amygdala, the BNHT, they integrate stress and reward system to produce a drug withdrawal induced negative affective state. And within system, there is hypofunction of the mesocortical limbic dopamine system. Sir, in the within system, there is hypofunction of the mesocortical limbic dopamine system, and here in between system, the extended amygdala, the nucleus accumbens, they integrate the stress and reward system to produce a drug withdrawal state. So positive reinforcement is when we are excited or aroused to perform a task. So when we take the substance and it results in pleasure or gratification, that is positive reinforcement. We are motivated to take. Stimulus result in a positive response. So pleasure or gratification. So yes, sir. Yes, sir. So when we remove a stimulus, answer results in taking away the treatment. Yes, sir.
He does something and something is taken away from him. So he does a bad. So you take away his TV privileges, you take away his rights. That is
Yes.
medical.
Yes.
ठीक है?
Yes. Sir.
So, but not explaining to me what happened. So control and control.
So in impulse control, there is arousal and we are excited to take the drug. So which leads to pleasure or gratification. And sir, further it leads to regret or guilt or self-reproach. But when again, when we are presented, when we are so जब associations होती है, so drug के साथ drug है, yes sir, yes sir. So when there is anxiety or stress, when withdrawal symptoms are produced, then we repeatedly consume the drug to relieve those symptoms.
What is the action?
Sir, action is to repeatedly consume the drug to relieve those symptoms.
Not taking the drug, and it is taken away. When you take the drug, it is like if you don't do your homework, you don't get to the school. Do your homework, you get to the school. So if he doesn't take drugs, he will feel anxiety, taste of quality. It's not that high. Okay, that is the difference. Initially, the person is taken for the high. Secondly, then, the chronic phase, it is not the high. It is just that he doesn't take the drug, then
Yes, sir.
okay, that is negative.
Yes, sir.
Get the difference.
Yes, sir.
So, homeostatic impairment. National reward for food, water, some less effective at food. Okay. So, in terms of the like, internet, what can be done? Somebody is like doing meetings, cutting out, to he's not going to this friend, not going out. All right. So, how do you
The negative reinforcement so we can remove pleasures of privileges.
toxic stuff? You can your mobile, your TV, and you have to go out. Okay, you have to do something else. Stop people. You consume it, and it takes a lot. You are feeling like study. You play Candy Crush for 15 minutes. You go to that study. Because the brain is not like that. You do a good day. What are the stress-like effects?
So the negative factors something that are created irritability, anxiety, dysphoria. So which is possible. So the withdrawal syndrome also in the action to consume the drug to relieve those symptoms.
Also, because will be changing the surface that you will feel stress.
Yes, sir. When the drug is not.
There should be somebody for a deadline in stress to follow. तो मुझे दिखता रहता है ये गुस्सा बदल भी रहता है that constantly that
Yes, sir.
Secondly, like other things are available system, hypotension,
Yes, sir.
natural disorder, away from like natural disease, emotion, no problem, job one, no problem, okay, physically, no problem, okay, there is people China, right? He has quit drugs for 7 days, 10 days, everybody's taking it. Okay, not people. That is actually not releasing the dopamine. Should the people think that he is in a great dopamine. He doesn't feel so. Emptiness is sometimes boredom. Boredom is they just don't get that and you can not come back. Still, really mentioned perspective. Just most of the stuff on the same level for internet. You have the main or pathway. Or what pathway
So earlier we sir in a initial phase में सर हम drug की presence को हम respond करते हैं dopamine high आते हैं. So then the idea of holding a cigarette, it is a cue. So then we get a high from idea of holding a cigarette also.
Okay.
So then we start to associate cues with reward.
What is that?
Mm. Mm. Then we are not able to achieve the same amount of high. So craving. So craving.
So if you start thinking that I will, the person is there, you say for today. Now, over the period of time, every day you realize currently expectation of that expectation itself, that idea itself, it results in some dopamine and it releases that. You can say withdrawal symptom. Okay, so that idea of that I will get that in itself, if it does not act on it, then it will come back. It can act on it. So idea perceive that itself on how your person निकल गया आगे withdrawal symptom देख सकते हैं वो पैसा लेके निकल गया ना पैसा ले लिया उनको कुछ करने पैसे का तो वो उसको खाई देगा या नहीं मिल जाएगा वही वो जब तक कंज्यूम करेगा वो कंजम्पशन उसका उसको वो कम करेगा वो उसको एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं हम लोग देते हैं तो उसको एक्सपेक्टेशन होता है तो उसको कहानी करने वो काम करता है फार्माकोलॉजी तो वो वहाँ पे घर से निकला पैसे लेके निकल गया वो चीज़ भी उसकी जरूरत है यहाँ पे भी है that process itself is reducing the okay so the sensory cues they also dopamine firing the के बाद में secondary high मिलेगा तो ज़्यादा उसको that is why the perceived activities also जो drug addiction लगा हुआ पैसा निकालने उसके जैसे withdrawal symptom कम होता है अगर वो घर से निकल गया पैसे की बंदोबस्त करने फिर और वो जो है अपने फ्रेंड से कहीं से जुगाड़ करने के लिए तो उसको लैक्टिन मशीन पेन में सबका कम है that is why you keep on indulging in that. You're thinking that you will only, it is not that you will only have a pleasure when it takes it, you know, activity. You want to go to a movie, and the movie may turn out to be boring, but you are going out and the time to buy tickets, or you go out for a picnic or something. Activity itself will not be that pleasure, but still that will not stop you from doing it again. because that planning, that everything activity, that is essentially only for the end product. It is same here that the pursuit of the activity, then that is also pleasure. Yes. Yes. So acute administration, the it will bring this reward, but mainly the smell. Decrease lesser, even small brain stimulation can dot. Only getting to try more and solve same goes with requirement. What is the opponent process?
So this is the basis for the development of tolerance. So initially, when we consume the drug, we experience a drug high, and our opponent processes are not stronger enough. And so, so we can say, sir, withdrawal, the negative affective state.
So you are so, you are told that the holiday starts. You are zero, it is high. Why is that? It should be zero. No? Something that is not so whenever there is a positive stimulation, there is a negative stimulation. Normal things to that. Something if it is missing, then even if it is like you come back to zero, you don't come back to zero. You go for that. Like for example, take a report when it comes out to me. I could be happy. First of all, okay, so these kind of things. The opposite phase, the brain was this case is that if you miss out on something perceived to be positive, then it goes into one. Okay, so first stimulation, that next come back to the yes, if there was new is the opponent is the drug opponent is that is aversions. Aversions क्या हुआ?
So the negative withdrawal symptoms.
We are wrong. आप लोगों से कौन कौन पढ़ा है what is that neural adaptation monitoring system? How you have the function of the cortical
In binge or intoxication, so basal CTPs. Yes. In the binge or intoxication phase, the basal ganglia is involved. So mucosic membranes, also striatum, cancer, lobus pallidus. So these are involved in habit formation, and experience of rewards. And so further, when in the second stage, the withdrawal and negative effect. So amygdala is involved, and so
This diagram is explained. Bupropion works all the pieces in the fat.
So because it acts on the alpha and alpha beta 2 receptors, this for nicotine active. Yes, sir. Yes. Naltrexone, sir, so it acts on neuro antagonist. So it is a neuro antagonist. So it can also work in opioid craving, and sir also alcohol. So because alcohol, sir, yes, sir. So alcohol, sir, also directly acts on opioid receptors to increase dopamine. Yes, sir. And so camprosate creates a artificial alcohol system because alcohol, sir, enhances the matrix. Artificial alcohol.
Even by detox. That's like that's into govern neuron. So
Yes, sir.
that's like that. So basically, so that way it increases the intoxicated state. It will help in the mitigating process.
esto करके आए लेकिन
This we talked about but somehow I did not get time. So it is more conceptual than what actually happens. Let's say you go into the definitions, try to understand the definitions what was actually happening. So we'll see because come back to the whatever we've